Well, I'm here in the Union Jack Club. Last time we met was about 2 years ago in the Union Jack Club, I think, wasn't it?
Is that long ago?
I think
but
so.
Time does fly.
Time does fly.
And
back when I was really a virgin to this movement, and now I'm a few miles under my belt. And of course, Anne-Marie, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. Before we say anything, I want to commend you for your insight, your intellect, the way you come about this in a rational way, and also your courage. I think you're a woman of huge courage, and one of the reasons, there are a few reasons when I decided to sort of step into this. You were one of the reasons. Tommy was one of the reasons, because I saw that you guys were literally standing on your own. There was nobody standing with you, and you were both putting across the arguments that we're trying to deploy in such a clever and in a way that people can understand very, very easily. And I think you need to be commended for that. And also, from a British point of view, and please, this is not meant to be in any way insulting. An Irish woman coming to Britain and actually saving the British is nothing short of miraculous and fantastic. So
I haven't said yet.
Well, no, but I'm looking forward to the next 10 years when we do get our country back. And we're gonna win this, right? We're gonna win.
Of course.
Why do you do this? Why do you do this?
I can't not do it. It's a lot of it is about truth. I can't see the truth and pretend it's not there. And it's I describe it as science fiction because that's what it feels like to me. I had this time of sort of looking at things and thinking, can anyone else see this? Does no one else see what's happening here? And we're being told what to do. We're being ordered around by an alien faith and an alien culture has come not just to Britain but to Europe and started ordering us around. And we're a frightened country. People are frightened to speak their minds, and that to me is one of the most serious aspects of this. Fear, we're afraid.
It is, and I think
you cannot fight back.
You cannot fight back. And I mean, in a way I feel like a bit of a coward because I've known about this for a long. I mean, I was telling people about this. Well, maybe I just didn't have a platform back then, but I was telling people about this in the 90s. Just through personal experience and through looking at the Quran and looking at Christianity and kind of comparing the two, and so I felt a bit like a bit of a coward when you guys were just going at it, and I was thinking, do you step in now? But yeah, I mean, once you know, and obviously the more you learn, the more horrific it becomes,
and the more determined you become.
Exactly. And I don't know whether you would agree with this, but I think the UK, and this might sound very, very melodramatic, but I think the UK is in graver danger now than it was even in the Second World War.
I agree with that. The enemy is, I remember Paul Weston saying, even the Nazis didn't stone their own daughters to death. And this is, plus, of course, we were all united against the Nazis. The country was together. You had this heroic British spirit, this rising up, this fighting back, this cooperation, this singing down on the tube when the Blitz was going on. That fighting British spirit has now been completely dissolved because we've been told since the Second World War that Britain owes the world a debt, and their debt can be paid by giving the country to strangers from the other side of the world.
And I think that's a hugely important issue, because if we had pride in our country,
that's what's wrong.
I think it's contagious. If you go down to, we were talking about Speaker's Corner earlier on, if you go down to Speaker's Corner, whatever you say about them, the Muslims at Speaker's Corner are proud of their religion and what they believe in. I think they're absolutely, completely deluded lunatics, but they're proud of what they do, right? But the British are now scared to be proud of what they do. We're constantly apologising. What are we apologising for? For giving the world democracy, for spreading Christianity throughout the world, for giving the world a first-class legal system, for giving the world sewage treatment, shipbuilding. What are we apologising for? And I think it's about time we turned around and said, no, British culture is good culture, and that's something I'm passionate about, is educating the British people that your country is something to be proud of. We won the 2 world wars. We didn't lose, we won, and we were fighting in both world wars. We were fighting against totalitarianism, and we were fighting against aggressors, and we turned it round, and we won. And I believe that we're in, and thankfully it's not a shooting war, and let's hope that we can sort it out without any of that. And, we're always saying over and over again we're against violence, but we are in a conflict situation. It's a political and ideological conflict, as opposed to a
absolutely. And again, unlike the fight against the Nazis, the government are not on our side. So we have to fight our own government to fight for the country. We have to fight the British state in order to be British, in order to keep Britain. That's a unique situation.
It is absolutely unique.
This is our big problem. This is our big problem. This guilt, this unfounded guilt, and that starts in the schools. It's been going on for years and years, and of course the very concept of country is disappearing. Post-Brexit, Theresa May, for example, signed us up to loads of military defence cooperation. She didn't sign up to PESCO, but she did to several others without any scrutiny from Parliament. For all the good that would do.
And without the permission of the British people.
But that's, we're still entangling. So, they have, and one of the demands of these organisations, these agreements with the EU, is that we will go to war, essentially, at the request of the United Nations. Yeah. So it's an international body requesting military intervention from an international body, both unelected, and we're expected to do it. That's the demise of the country. The country doesn't defend itself.
They're trying to dissolve the nation state, and this is why the Brexit thing was so important. This is why being in this room is so important, because obviously the Union Jack Club is a veterans club. It's about the British military, it's celebrating the British military, and I'm sure our forefathers, people that, we've just gone past the celebration of the Battle of the Somme. Those men that fought in the Somme would be horrified if they saw what was happening now.
I certainly think so. Why not? Yeah. Why did they bother? If we're going to voluntarily give the country away a few decades later,
without even a fight,
it's stamping on their graves. It really is. It's obscene.
How do we wake? I mean, obviously we were talking earlier about social media and freedom of speech. How can we wake the people up to support For Britain, to support UKIP, to support any of the patriotic political parties that are genuine, mainstream in terms of ideology and what we're talking about? How can we wake people up to get involved in? And I class this as a whole movement. I don't pick and choose. I think we're all part of the same movement. I'd love to see real unity. But how do we get people who are not switched on involved in this? What can we do?
It is all about education, and it is all about evidence to me. It's being made harder and harder because social media is shutting us down, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem we have, and the biggest problem I've had in all these years I've been talking about this, is people just don't believe us. They don't believe you. I used to travel the country telling people about Sharia councils, and they would say that can't be happening. That cannot be happening in the UK, you're wrong. So we need evidence of what Sharia does, and to put it out there as often and as much, and to shout as loud as we can, and to persist and to persevere, because there is no one easy answer to this. If I knew the answer, what do we do? I would do it.
Yeah.
But we don't have an easy answer. We're against the state, as you know, we're against the media, but we have truth on our side. It will take time, it will take perseverance, but it's all about education. It's all about teaching people and showing them the evidence. Plus, I think they're waking up on their own. I think about 80% of this country knows there's something really wrong. There's something really wrong with Islam. They're just too frightened to articulate it. They don't quite know how to articulate it. I think they need leaders to articulate it for them, so that they'll think, yes,
and that's what you're doing.
It. That's what I think.
That's what you're doing.
Just saying what I think, and that's what we need. Lots and lots and lots of that.
And we need people doing that at local level, don't we? So that's why branches for these political parties and branches for these groups. The football lads, the UK Freedom Movement, the veterans. They all need to be talking to people in their own local areas, in the pub, in the cafe. We need to radicalise our children. It's called radical.
Bringing up the conversation in the pub is actually really important.
Yeah.
Because you can guarantee that there are people thinking this stuff, but they're too afraid to say it, just in case the other person isn't thinking the same thing. And then you have this almost an inadvertent conspiracy of silence. It just takes one person to say it, and then someone else will feel braver, and then someone else will feel braver. From
the point of view that this whole idea of bravery. When I first started, I remember when I made my first speech way back in 2017 with the veterans, and I sat down in Gatwick Airport, flying back to Belfast afterwards. I thought, oh, what have I done? But the reality is, and it's something Douglas Murray said years ago, the water's not as cold as you think it is.
Absolutely.
It's not actually that bad. Okay, if we get attacked by jihadis and they do the worst, well, that's it. It's over, right? But the reality is, it's not as bad. Yes, you get vilification, you get mocked, you get ostracised by. But I didn't like the people that were ostracising me anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I think we've got to encourage people that if you do want to speak out and say, no, there's something wrong here. What we believe is right, and we've got a right to say this.
And we've got the evidence to back it up.
We've got, of course,
That's key.
huge amounts of evidence. There's so much stuff published, and no matter how hard they try, they can't take it all off the internet. They can't burn all the books that tell the truth about Islam. They can't do it. The cat's out the bag. We live in an information age. You cannot. They're trying to stifle the information, trying to silence the information, but they can't do it. So I think just encourage people that want to get involved, and it's worth whatever price you have to pay. Just do it.
But what you said for us is not as cold as you think. That's a really good point.
It is.
We had people, which is devastating, we had people who are standing to be candidates in the local elections at the last minute because they were afraid. But the candidates who did stand really enjoyed themselves and nothing happened to them.
Exactly.
But public humiliation isn't easy.
No.
And that will happen. Public humiliation is very, very difficult. And before, my first encounter with the national press was during UKIP, and it does. But you get over it, and it toughens you up.
Yeah.
And for that, we need to support each other.
Yes.
We need to offer each other the backup.
I agree.
And
100%.
And to say, look, remind people what the press are.
Yeah.
You're not the problem here. They are.
Exactly.
And we're here. We're here for each other to get you through that initial.
And I would say, history will judge us kindly, even if the worst happened and we lost the UK to Islam. And I think the reality that we've got to wake up to as well is, if people don't act, we will lose. I don't believe we're going to lose, because I believe that there's enough people in this room who are not going to let us lose. And if we keep doing what we're doing and keep encouraging each other, we can fight on. But if everybody sits back and everybody stops doing it, we will lose. And the country, I believe it will become an Islamic state.
So do I, and I think that a lot in the civil service, a lot in the top notches, top brass of the military believe the same thing.
And they're planning for it.
Do, and they are planning for it. And it's difficult to say because there's no evidence I can provide for that. But I do believe it, and I have, there are people who are in this sort of melee who will tell you this. I was told once that the Queen has already been informed that Britain will be an Islamic state by 2050, hence why the royal family is becoming so pro-Islam. It sounds a little bit far-fetched, but I actually wouldn't be one bit surprised.
I wouldn't say. The cabinet over there has got Lawrence of Arabia, his picture in the cabinet. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia was probably the biggest traitor that the UK has ever seen, because he was betraying us to Islam before anybody knew what betraying us to Islam was, right? But the reality, there's a vein of that, and it seems to run through MI6, the Foreign Office. There seems to this vein of Islamophilia where they would rather placate Islam. I mean, Mark Sidwell's a prime example. He's the head of national security. He says the biggest threat to the UK is organised crime. Now, Mark Sidwell spent time in Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. He's an ex-MI6 officer. He's the most powerful civil servant in the country. And he's saying the biggest threat is organised crime.
We've always had organised crime.
Exactly.
For as long as there have been people, there's been organised crime. For 1400 years there's been Islam, and it's been dominating and conquering all around it. And yet somehow it's either in denial or they're in acceptance. They've accepted it. It's inevitable. We're going to be Islamic, so we had our turn, now it's their turn, sort of attitude.
I think it's a path of least resistance, and it kind of leads us into Northern Ireland and the peace process and what's happened to Northern Ireland veterans. And again, it's a difficult one to talk about because obviously it's a contentious issue. But again, I lived through the back end of the Troubles and the ceasefires and so on and so forth. And what I saw was really an appeasement process where the IRA were given huge leeway. That murderers were let out of prison, and then of course we have the insanity where veterans can now be prosecuted where IRA terrorists can't be prosecuted.
You just wondered. I mean, whose idea was that?
Probably the IRAs and the Labour Party just agreed to it.
Yeah, I mean, how can it possibly be justifiable to give immunity to the IRA, but not to the British soldiers who, through no choice of their own, were sent over there to fight them? How can that be? It can't be any more obvious, can it, how anti-British the government actually is?
Exactly.
Look at Labour. Every terrorist hater, British hater on the planet, and Jeremy is in their pocket.
Jeremy loves them. But the reality of it is too, I mean, Peter Hain and Peter Hain and Tony Blair and Mo Molam much preferred to talk to terrorists than they did to constitutional politicians. That's the history of the Northern Ireland peace process. And I think what's happened And in fact, I would almost, I'm sure there's documentary evidence for this. I think what's happened is that when they've looked at Islam and gone, well, it worked in Northern Ireland, we appeased them and they went away in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
It's going to work in England if we do exactly the same thing, and I'm convinced that is government policy. If we're nice to the jihadis, they'll leave us alone and they'll stop cutting our wives' throats.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
No.
But they see weakness.
And they'll go more.
You
and more.
appease, they see weakness, and they will take more and more. Well, they're laughing. They're
They're
laughing at us. They're laughing at the Western world.
Of course.
The possible exception of Trump.
Yeah.
They know he'll only be there for hopefully another 5 years. He's slowed it down, but who comes next?
Exactly.
Is the next US president? And actually, the Americans are so important. America is so important in keeping the West alive.
Absolutely.
And its constitution is under attack by the left over there. If the lights go out in America, the lights go out.
Exactly.
So who's coming after Trump? Will there be another? I'm not convinced of it. I don't think the Republicans are going to find another Trump.
I mean,
it's dire.
Trump wasn't meant to happen, and Brexit wasn't meant to happen. And I mean, I don't want to boast, but before the Brexit vote, I said Brexit was going to happen. I said Trump was going to be president. I said Boris is going to be prime minister. This is. I've only got 3 witnesses that testify to this. But I also said England were going to win the World Cup, so I got one wrong, and I'm more devastated about getting that one wrong than any of the others. But I mean, the whole thing with Trump and with America, he has completely upset the apple cart. But what the American deep state seems to do exactly the same as they do in the UK, because all these people, this is going to sound so conspiratorial, but it's true. They whittled away people like Mike Flynn, who was a US Special Forces general, who was saying no, Islam itself is the problem. Obama supported the jihadists in Syria. This is wrong, and really went hard on that. Flynn's all of a sudden implicated in something with Russia, which was purely fictitious. Yes, he's lost his job. He's discredited. He's going through the court system. This is a decorated general. This is how ruthless these people are, and I don't think the British state is any different. The British Army, I was absolutely gobsmacked. 2 things. Do you remember the video? The advert for the Muslim praying.
I do.
Well, I don't know if you know the context of that. I mean, there was a very good friend of mine who's an ex-Muslim explained the context of that and told me which Quranic verses that was based on. And I think it was somewhere in Surah 5, and he just went through it. He says, this is what this is based on. The infidels protecting the Muslim praying. That was straight out of the Quran. Nobody's realised that. Nobody's clocked it.
It was probably made by the Muslim Council of Britain.
Well,
or some equivalent.
Maybe the London Sharia Council. Maybe that was why they were meeting the Ministry of Defence. You know.
They do this, and they're gormless, letting them get on with it, and they're making a mockery. It's like that when they let an imam pray in Gloucester Cathedral, and they denounced Jesus in the speech.
Exactly.
They chose that bit to stand in a church and denounce Jesus. They chose that deliberately.
Absolutely.
And the gormless congregation are sitting there. It's just
lunacy.
crazy.
Lunacy. I was driving through somewhere yesterday. In fact, I was in Luton. I was driving through Luton yesterday, and outside a church, a little church, and outside it said, "We love and welcome all Muslims in our church." Now that's fine. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. That's what Christians are meant to do. But are they going to say we love and want all veterans to come into the church? Are they going to say, why virtue signal and make a point of saying they love all Muslims? If you're Christian, you should love everybody. Bring everybody into the church, right? That's what they should be doing. But again, it's just this constantly let's be the biggest appeasers of this religion, and from a Christian point of view. And I think this is something that again nobody ever picks up on. From a Christian point of view, Islam is completely antichrist. It's a denial of the Trinity, a denial of the deity of Christ, and a denial of the fatherhood of God.
And you know what else? Here's another bit of insanity. Muslims are celebrated for saying that Jesus was a prophet of Islam. Look how tolerant they are. Isn't this lovely, saying that Jesus was... They've no idea they're absolutely insulting everything your faith is about.
Absolutely.
And you're applauding them
Absolutely.
for it. It's absolutely incredible. I must say, while we're on the subject, there is a problem within Christian theology with regard to this. And I don't know, are you a Christian?
Yes, yeah.
There is a problem to me with regard to Christian theology, which is love your enemy, which is welcome your enemy, which is open your arms to your enemy. And the enemy is here. And Christians are still saying, if you look at the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, they are still saying, the Pope got down and washed the feet of a refugee. There is an issue there.
Well, I mean, there's an issue. You see, you can love your enemy and still kill him.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
You know,
That's
if somebody comes charging through your door with an AK-47 and is going to shoot your whole family, you can totally justify using.
Is that in
force.
Scripture? That just
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look in the Book of Romans says that the state has a duty to bear the sword. So there's a complete duty to defend, for the state to defend its people.
We need to
so
send that to the Pope.
Yeah, we need to. Well, is the Pope a Christian? I mean,
well, I don't know actually.
We know he's a Catholic, but is he a
sure.
Christian? But anyway, we'll not go down the religious road, because we'll be talking for the next 3 hours. But I want to get back to some of the military stuff. Another example, I don't know if you're aware of the leaflet that the British Army put out.
Is that the one saying that extremists call themselves patriots?
Yeah.
Is that real? Because
That
I've
is
had a few
real.
people tell me that was
No,
it.
it
That
is.
was
It is 1,000,000%
Yeah,
nailed on
that's
real.
right.
Well, it was in the Daily Mail, so it must be true.
Oh, it must be. Well, to be fair, I mean, papers.
It's one of the things
they
do
spin,
tell the
but
truth.
Facts they have to tell.
The papers tell the truth occasionally, but
Well,
no, it is true. It is true. It's 100% from other sources. Because I did the same when I read that. And then when you read through it and you know what the government's up to, you go, yeah, that's 100% bang on with what the government's up to at the minute, you know. So being a patriot now disqualifies you for military service.
Isn't that?
So you can only fight for the United Nations, and you can't fight for the.
It just gets worse and worse. I remember that after Tommy had his photograph taken with some troops as well.
Man.
And this it's recorded speech that went around on social media saying we fight the Queen's enemies all over the world. Tommy Robinson does. You're fighting the Queen. No, you're not. Tommy Robinson is not the Queen's enemy.
No, he's not.
He is the Queen's ally.
Absolutely.
You are defending the Queen's enemy and opposing her ally.
He's the ally. Tommy is the ally of the whole country, and I think again there's a lot of moral cowardice within the establishment, and actually within some of the groups that would be affiliated with us, where they quite happily distance themselves from Tommy and ostracise Tommy. You know Tommy, I know Tommy. Now, on a personal level, I just think Tommy's a great guy. I think he's warm, he's nice, he's got a lovely family, he's a great guy as far as I'm concerned. But on a public level, he is the most courageous man I know. To the point of recklessness, you know.
Well, yeah.
If he was in the military, he would have been storming a trench with half a bayonet, no helmet, and just fighting until his last breath.
I agree with that.
To me, we need 1,000,000 Tommies. You know, we don't need to ostracize him, and it's moral cowardice to ostracize Tommy. You might not agree with everything Tommy does. Stand with him on this cause, and be a friend to Tommy Robinson. The way he's been treated by the state, by different groups, I think is absolutely reprehensible, and something I get quite upset and passionate about it, because there are loads of idiots out there that deserve to be ostracised, but Tommy isn't one of them.
You know, he is almost, as you say, recklessly brave, but that's sometimes what you need.
Absolutely what you need.
He's utterly fearless.
Absolutely.
You'd almost wish he was a little bit more careful. But he has given this explosion of discussion about Islam happened largely because of him. He's the leading figure in getting the country talking about Islam, and regardless of what they say about him in the papers, but they're writing about Islam in the papers.
Exactly.
That's what he's done.
I mean, he sat on GMTV. I don't know if you saw that.
Was this the one with
Piers Morgan?
Show some damn respect. Did you see him when there was an ex-Muslim woman on not long after saying the same thing?
Exactly the same thing.
And old Piers faded away.
He didn't know what to say. They just cut her off. That was that American one. They cut her off. But Tommy's waving the Quran, saying this is a cursed book. And of course Piers Morgan near fell off his stool. You know, they had to get the smelling salts for poor old Piers, because he thought I'm going to get killed as well as him. You know.
Oh, he definitely made quick work of. I'm not involved with this. This is not me. I didn't do this.
Put that book down, man. You know. So that was all. I mean, but it is. I mean, it's almost comical if it wasn't so serious, because the reality is that people have been killed, and it's random killing. It's killing of complete innocence, killing of children, the rape of maybe a million of the daughters of England raped by these monsters, these savages, and I'm frustrated that people haven't been more vocal in their opposition. If we did a protest, 1,000,000 of your daughters have been raped, can we have 1,000,000 men get on the streets? If we were lucky, we'd get 10,000. But the Remainers can get 500,000 people on the streets of London. There's something deeply wrong in our society, and that's a big battle. That's what we've got to really work on, the education. We've got to put these arguments across in a rational, sensible way, and we've got to win the centre ground back. Because I think what we're saying is mainstream and is sensible and is right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's only because the left has moved so far to the left that we are now considered far right.
Yeah.
But I do agree we would struggle to get 10,000, whereas the Remainers will get. But they have everything on their side. They have the state on their side, they have the police on their side, they have the media on their side. So the media will advertise if there's a big rally, and people, and it'll be advertised again and again and again, and it'll be all over. So we don't have that. But there is also the fear. There is this they went out and voted Labour in Rotherham.
It's incredible.
How?
And Peter.
How? Well, I don't know if they did vote.
Well, yeah. Well, somebody voted in Peterborough, but
someone was filling out postal
maybe
votes
someone in
Peterborough.
Karachi voted in Peterborough. Maybe there was a spreadsheet in a mailing list. Yeah, exactly. They sent the postal votes here from all over the world and managed to get an anti-Semitic Labour MP.
Oh, right.
Well, sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. An allegedly, seeing as though there's all these cameras pointing, an allegedly anti-Semitic Labour MP, just in case anyone tries to sue me, because they're very litigious.
I don't think people would become Labour MPs now if they don't have a little twinge of anti-Semitism.
Exactly. But I mean, we're talking about the police there. The rank and file police are on our side. I believe that.
I think a lot of them are.
I think a lot of them are. Now, obviously, there's probably a new generation coming through being totally brainwashed.
And they're all university educated.
Exactly, which is a disaster for the police.
Yeah.
Police aren't meant to be university educated, they're meant to be like me. If you look at PC Keith Palmer in Parliament Square, and it's something, whenever I see that man's face, I get tears in my eyes, because he was a veteran. He'd served in the artillery for 9 years. He then served 12 years in the police. He's actually best friends of one of my friends in the veterans, and he fell defending Parliament against a jihadi lunatic.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there was an armed policeman there who shot that psychopath and killed him. His boss, overweight, obese, useless lump of lard, sat in his car, sweating, panicking, hiding under the seats, while one of his colleagues was being hacked to pieces. That's leadership. That's the leadership of the British police, and that's where the problem is. Not with the rank and file bobbies. It's these lunatics that are running the show.
Yeah, absolutely. The senior is cowards. I mean, he's clearly a coward, but so are the people inside the Parliament.
Absolutely.
And they've absolutely trampled on the memory of this policeman, because what they did, you're right, he died defending them, and they turned around and stood on his grave and said, but they did.
Yeah.
They're still defending the jihadist that killed him. They're still not understanding what he did for the country and for them, and they're still appeasing, apologising for, covering up the truth. One of the most remarkable things to me, you'll know the Quran verse, the one who kills one person kills all
Oh
mankind.
yes, oh my goodness, Surah 533 I think it is.
Senior politicians on national television have read out that verse and left out the most important part over and over and over again. That's the extent of the lie. That verse tells us that they will kill you if you don't obey Sharia. That's what that verse actually says.
Absolutely.
And they take out the middle part to make it, and that's all they've got. That's what they wheel out every time, and it's a lie.
Do you know they
That's all
put
they have
that?
to depend on.
They put that on the Manchester Arena where the Ariana Grande concert bombing took place. That was on there almost on the anniversary.
We can't.
That verse, and again that verse out of context, because that verse, as far as I know, and again I've spoken to Muslim scholars about this, as far as I know, that verse relates only to the Jews. It's the children of Israel, and then the following verse tells us very, very clearly that if we don't obey Sharia law, we will be killed for not obeying Sharia law. Kill them where you find them. I think that's next. I'm not sure, but it's one of those. It's one of the 106.
That's what that combined with the next verse, definitely. Obey Sharia.
I probably should read the Quran every day, but I don't.
Oh God, who could read the Quran
exactly.
every day? Who needs that in their life?
Exactly.
Honestly, I read it once and that was enough.
Yeah.
That was actually painful.
It is.
It's very hard to read.
Oh yes, I've read it. I have read it several times. I like the Wahhabi translations with their footnotes where they put in all the bits that are about the Jews and the Christians. So the Wahhabis don't. I like the Wahhabis, because they tell the truth. They tell it how it is. They show Islam for what it really is. They're not hiding anything. Whereas you get the Islamic apologist who's going to come in and try and tickle your ears and tell you, oh, don't worry about it. It's all going to be okay. We don't really mean all that stuff. You know. Whereas the Wahhabis are saying,
they show it.
Yeah, exactly.
Corpses dangling from light posts.
100%.
That's Sharia.
Exactly.
That's what we're heading towards.
Exactly. So what do we? You know, we've talked a bit about what the problem is. What is the solution? What do we do next?
We need a political solution. We cannot. There's a lot of ways to create a political solution. So, you know, every organisation, every campaign group, every rally in the street, all matter. You know, it takes arrows to bring down an elephant. I shouldn't compare it to an elephant because I love elephants. But, you know, you've got to fire a load of arrows to bring it down. But there has to be a political option. And one of the things I keep telling people, you know, stop voting for them. This lot in Westminster caused this. Do not expect them to stop, you know, to reverse. They're not going to. They all have to go. That's a huge undertaking and a huge ask, but it happens. Amazing historic events do occur. The nature of Parliament has changed before, it can change again. Just over 100 years ago, Labour didn't exist. So it can change and does change. People need to believe, they need to understand that there's a problem, this is our survival. They need to believe they can stop it, and they need someone to go out and cast their tick on their little ballot paper. That's what it will take. But before that can happen, you need education. You need people to understand.
It's a twin track, isn't it?
It's a multi-track. It's a multi-track. We need everything.
And I think one of the things we've got, no matter who people vote for, I mean, we're from two different political parties, but you know, I have so much admiration for what you do, and that I would never ever criticise, you know, for Britain. And we just have a slightly different way of, you know, and there's reasons for that, you know, and you know, but I think there's place for both of our parties to smash the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, and they do need to be electorally smashed. And I think what we need to do is encourage every single person. It was very heartening today, actually. There wasn't a huge number there. It says maybe it's 1,000 people at Tommy's demonstration when we were there this morning. I think the number's grown slightly now. But when I made my speech, I said, how many people here are registered to vote? And almost everybody in that crowd put their hand up. So those people get it and they're registered to vote. We need to activate the British working classes who don't vote. We need to get them to start voting and realise that they are the first victims of this. I was talking to a guy yesterday who was on a Unite picket line of all things at Luton Airport from the security detail. I mean, this is crazy. The security people at Luton Airport are on strike at the minute. I mean, how vulnerable does that make Luton Airport? But they're on strike because they are being absolutely shafted by their employers, who are a Spanish company who don't care if a plane gets bombed at Luton Airport. And that is globalism. And I said to the guy from Unite, he didn't know who I was, I don't think he did. He was chatting away to me. And I said, look, I support what you're doing. I says, but you've got to realise that this is because of globalism. And globalism is what your union supports. I said, what are you going to, you know, and of course that kind of killed the conversation a little bit.
They don't want to hear that.
No.
They don't want to hear that.
But he's a nice guy, and he was fighting for what I think was a just cause. So we need to try and get those people back over onto our side and realise that the Labour movement is totally
I think we also need to appeal to people on other issues. Disengage from politics on other issues. This is one of the things we want to do in our manifesto this year, is really reach into topics that are rarely discussed in politics. I mean, our taxi driver policy, for example. Who talks about taxis? So we have a policy on taxis. You know, even things like the sex trade or cannabis. These things we're going to start talking about because people who are really interested in this. Hold on a minute. And then listen more and read more and get to know more. I want the Labour Party has to go.
Absolutely.
It is evil. And that is, I use that word deliberately, it's evil. But I also want to reach a few, the Conservatives.
The Conservatives have to go as well.
Because they're going to lose the country.
The entire political establishment has to go. And that's why I think there's room for probably 2 or 3 parties that understand what we understand. And they can appeal to the slightly different demographics. Some can go after the Labour voter, some can go after the Tory voter, and I think that's what's going to have to happen. It's going to be, how long have we got, Anne-Marie? How long have we got to do this?
It's speeding up. Progress is speeding up. I actually feel optimistic.
I do too.
I think things are changing. It's very different from 5 years ago. 5 years ago, far more people were asleep. I don't know how long we have. I know that it takes It's taken decades to get us here, and it has. You know, the immigration, for example, has been going on for decades. And the way I envisage it is Britain as a massive ship, and it's been turned to the left for decades, and we've got to start turning it back. But we can't expect things to happen overnight. We have to accept this is a long old slog. But we have 95% and 95% of the UK. Come on.
Do you think that's true, or do you think that we're being lied to? I would say 10. I would be gut feeling 10%.
Maybe. I would still, it leaves us at 90%.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, people have started talking about, is it 2021 the next census is?
Yes, it would be. It's every 10 years.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be another census. I really
don't. No, because the people will be so horrified that they go.
Yeah. It's like when they tried to cover up that Muhammad was the most popular boy's name.
Yeah.
By doing it in different
with all the
spellings.
Muhammad.
And they're going to cover this up. They won't. I don't think we'll get another census, to be honest.
No. I mean, what about things like the rights of ex-Muslims and Muslim women who are being abused in these horrendous? I mean, that's got to be an area that we can battle on as well, because to me, if we can win even Muslim hearts and minds when they and that's where the education is so important, so we can explain to them how bad. I mean, I know people in your party who were basically,
I'm very proud of the fact we probably have the two most well-known ex-Muslims have joined us, Nissa Hussain and Mohammed Fayaz. Of course, Kat, who's our deputy chair, she's an ex-Muslim. And they're absolutely key, because they can give an insight that I can't. I've never been a Muslim.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like to grow up a British Muslim. I don't know what it's like to grow up in these ghettos. Kat has experience of having been through the Sharia councils to try and get a divorce out of it. She knows how women are treated. And we've got Nisar, who had to leave his home under armed
Well, he was nearly beaten to death.
He was nearly, and there was, he turned to the Archbishop of Canterbury for help, turned his back. He told me the Archbishop of Canterbury literally waved his hand.
Absolutely.
The police not interested, government not interested. This is a British-born man. He therefore is entitled to the rights of British people, and he has no religious freedom. This is not being protected.
And I mean, with Nissa, again, if you get to know Nissa on a personal level, he is the sort of person that you want next to you.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's a gentleman.
He's a gentleman.
He's if every single British Pakistani was like Nissa Hussain, there wouldn't be a problem in the country. There would be no problem whatsoever. There would be no problem whatsoever. And that's why I think the ex-Muslims, what you're doing, fighting for the ex-Muslims is absolutely commendable. And we need to see more of that. We need to see more lobbying for those guys. And one of the problems you've got is they need a place to go when they leave Islam, because they lose everything. They lose their families, they lose their friends. They are in danger. There's no, as Nisar proves, and a lot of them are threatened, and a lot of them revert. I mean, an ex-Muslim friend of mine reverted, and I said, "Why have you reverted?" He says, "Well, I don't believe any of it." He says, "But it's just easier for me if I'm back in the." And this guy was very prominent. So that's the tragedy, that people are going back because they're not getting support.
It's a tragedy for a person to be forced to live a lie. What is, living a lie will eat you away.
It's a prison.
It is a prison, and it's almost worse than a physical prison. It's totally detrimental to a person's well-being, and nobody in this country should be forced to live a lie in that way. Ex-Muslims are absolutely key. They are incredibly difficult and awkward for the establishment because they are not white, overwhelmingly. They know this thing from the inside, and they can't be just dismissed as fascist and racist the way we are, and we are because we're white.
Well, actually,
ironically, we are subject to racial.
I must say, Nissa Hussain came to do a demonstration for Tommy in Belfast with me, and the local, well, I don't know what they were, Alliance, which is basically the equivalent of Liberal Democrats, Sinn Féin, and a few street thugs stood there and chanted "Nazi scum off our street" at Nissa Hussain while he was making a speech. So Nissa is a man who's experienced real fascism from Islamo-fascists, was basically called a Nazi by street thugs and political leaders from the Alliance Party and Sinn Féin.
It's interesting, isn't it? The two big parties in Northern Ireland are also completely in love with Islam.
Yeah.
How is this? What is this?
It's fear. It's fear. I mean, we had the famous case. Pastor McConnell spoke out about Islam. Peter Robinson spoke out about Islam. Both of them were basically destroyed by it.
They apologised, didn't they?
Pastor McConnell didn't apologise. I think he stood his ground. He said he'd apologise if he caused anyone any hurt, but he didn't apologise for what he said. I'm not sure about Peter Robinson, but both of them were basically destroyed by that. They both disappeared from the political realm. So yeah.
But what's her name? Arlene Foster. You know, last night when I was last in Northern Ireland, I looked up obviously various things going on, and I see Arlene Foster advertising about her visits to the mosques and how proud she is about her visits to them.
And the mosques in Northern Ireland, now this is according to Mosque, Islam UK, I think is what this website that gives a directory of all the mosques and what they're affiliated to. According to Islam UK, I think it's Islam UK, which is a Muslim-run directory of mosques. The mosque in Belfast is a Salafi mosque. The mosque in Newtownards is a Deobandi mosque. The mosque in Coleraine is a Salafi mosque. So these are the most extreme forms of Islam, and that's what the Muslims are telling us those mosques are. Now I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what this directory of mosques or whatever it's called is telling us about the mosques in Northern Ireland. So people have a complete blind spot to this. They think mosques are just churches that pray slightly differently. And
they think they're like Hindus and Sikhs.
Yeah.
It's just sort of an exotic. There's a lot of racism involved. Ironically, from their side is where the real racism is. They see a brown-skinned person and they infantilise them.
Yeah.
They can't possibly do anything wrong. They have brown skin. They're victims of white people. Anything they do is a reaction to white people because they have no autonomy.
Exactly.
And then there's this saviour complex.
Yeah.
We have to save them. God love them. And then there's the exotic.
Yes.
Oh, look at this is exotic, isn't it?
Exactly.
They come from somewhere else. They have this funny religion. Isn't this exotic? That's nice.
Yeah.
This is, great. This is driving it.
It is.
If Muslims were white, we wouldn't have.
Well, of course. I mean, a lot of them are now, and and a lot of the converts are the ones that have caused a lot of problems with, with the real radical ones down at Speaker's Corner.
If it was a white religion, if you like, this would not.
It wouldn't be an issue at all. No, I mean, it is. It's I don't know how we break that mindset down, but again, it's just something that people will only realise when it gets really, really bad, and then what do they do? I mean, how do we finish up here? I mean, because obviously, I mean, we're here in the Union Jack Club. This is a veterans club. What do you feel about the soldiers? What would you do in terms of things like Soldier F and those malicious prosecutions of soldiers? Because we've got to sort of have some sort of equality, and we don't have equality at the moment. We've got terrorists getting set free and soldiers being prosecuted. What would you do?
Well, it's already part of our policy to give British soldiers immunity.
Yeah.
We cannot have it. You're sending a message. You're demoralising them.
Absolutely.
You're telling the soldiers the state is not on your side. If we give them immunity, I mean, you have to be careful. You don't give blanket immunity because you might have a nutcase who goes out and but immunity in general, absolutely. It tells the soldiers you're on their side. You have to make it clear you're on their side. You have to start treating them better when they come back from a war zone. I've spoken to military veterans. They're basically thrown out of houses when they leave.
Yeah.
They're told, off you go. You're on your own now. Many of them have suffered severe trauma, very little help. They're expected to queue up at the NHS like everybody else. Well, no, I'm sorry. They should have their own hospital. They should have their own medical services. They should have guarantees of jobs when they leave the army. They should have a government that is clearly on their side. If the government is not on the side of the army, you have a split. You have a country that has a chasm down its middle. That army is there to defend you. It is there to go out and follow the orders of Parliament. God love them, but that is their job. Parliament therefore has to be on their side. And often, the most powerful thing you can do is just speak. If you had a leader who spoke out and said very clearly to the military of this country, I am on your side. That's step one.
And meant it.
Because
you hear all the platitudes. I mean, you see the Conservative MPs, Johnny Mercer and all these people who says he's standing for veterans, but then castigated Gerard Batten because Gerard's associated with Tommy, and how could he possibly go on a veterans demonstration when Gerard has been, like you, has been 100% behind this cause from the very, very beginning, supporting the veterans and wanting amnesty. And interestingly, I was talking to Tommy yesterday about prison, and not that I ever plan on going there, but I just said, well, if I get locked up for something I've said, I said, what's it like for a veteran in prison? He says, you are if you go to prison, you're dead, mate. he says, because one, you know, you've been speaking about Islam, he says, two, you're a veteran. He says, if veterans in prison, this is what he told me, veterans cannot tell anyone in that prison that they are veterans because of the Muslim takeover of those prisons. So if you're a veteran, you have to hide that, and you're told that by the prison officers.
I don't know why that's stunned me, but it has. I'm almost.
I was gobsmacked when he told me.
I mean, I remember the guy who went into the pub in his uniform and was told to get out.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't serve him in his uniform. It's so, you know, if you see America, America is so different to this. They have signs up in the airports. I've spent a bit of time in airports in America. I don't see much beyond airports and hotel or train stations. But they have signs up in pretty much every airport thanking the veterans. Veterans get front, you know, the best seats on the plane. I've seen, you know, I saw people go up to veterans and shake their hands. The Americans have such a you know, tradition of honour and pride in their serving people. If we could just get a morsel of what the Americans had, it would change.
We went to York, garrison town. Always was a garrison town. We did a Northern Ireland veterans demonstration in York, and the left came out, and I had veterans that were in the 70s. It wasn't my demonstration, but I was speaking out. We had veterans who were in their 70s marching past this crowd of leftists who were shouting at them, literally spitting abuse at them, and calling them Nazis. 70-year-old veterans with their medals on, walking through York, being called Nazis by these absolute scum. And I grabbed hold of one of the guys, one of these they just smell really bad, don't they? That's what just some smelly guy. And I said to him, I says, why are you doing this? I said, why are you against the veterans? Because you're all fascists, you murdered people in Northern Ireland, you're fascist scum. And I just looked at her and says, yeah, maybe so, but you need a shower.
And a dictionary. Because no, they don't seem to know what fascism is.
No.
And half the country could do with a history lesson on what the Nazis were.
Yeah.
And the Nazis were utter evil. And you know, all you have to do is go to a museum to see. I went to Anne Frank House, for example, recently, and you see what they did. And to call, you know, Jews were not allowed to get on trams. They weren't allowed to go to school.
Such an insult to them.
Absolutely weren't allowed to own business. You know, it was just an extraordinary oppression, real oppression. And then, of course, they were rounded up and sent to gas chambers. And this is what we're being called for telling the truth about a violent religion.
It's disgraceful. And that demo was nothing to do with Islam. Absolutely nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. It was about Northern Ireland veterans being persecuted by a National Socialist Party called Sinn Féin. Anyway.
Which also loves Islam.
Yeah.
Strangely.
Exactly. We're going to have to finish off, Anne-Marie, but what would your message to veterans and their families be? What would For Britain do for veterans and their families if you've got power?
Make them important again. As I said, you know, sometimes all you have to do is speak up for people. I mean, in terms of policy, we want a veterans minister, we want a particular veterans hospital, we want guarantees of jobs for people who leave the army with a good record, and we want immunity from prosecution.
Not always a good record.
Well, you know, you've got to. There is, you know, it's very easy to say, but you've got to be realistic. You've got to understand that there are going to be errors. You can't have a blanket policy for everything. So but if we have to put the state on the side of the army again. That will only happen when Parliament changes. And I don't mean putting pressure on Parliament to shift to a new position. I mean getting rid of them. But they do have to know that everyone I speak to, no matter what side they're on, sympathises with serving military and with veterans. They are not. It's the state that's against them, not the people. And I hope that they would take some sort of comfort from that, because I believe that the vast majority of the people are on their side. We have been betrayed, they have been betrayed by a corrupt and cowardly Westminster. And they are not on their own, the country is with them. That cowardly lot in Westminster has to go, and we need leadership. We need leadership that will, for day one, stand up and say, thank you. To the military families of this country, I am on your side, and from now on things are going to change. We will not let you come back from a war zone we sent you to and then say you're on your own, mate. It's never going to happen again if we have real leadership in this country.
Excellent. Anne-Marie, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.